Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to share with you the difficult, scarce and challenging days of Huyen and her mother trying to make a living. The morning at the small house by the canal is truly peaceful. As the first rays of sunlight filter through the tree branches, Huyen has already woken up, tidied up the yard, and watered the vegetable beds in front of the porch. Little Micah runs around her, sometimes picking up fallen leaves, sometimes sitting by the steps watching the chirping birds on the branches. After sweeping, Huyen scoops water to wash her child and Appo's face and gently tousles her still messy hair. Micah and Appo's clear laughter makes the small yard feel warmer. The small dog also runs around wagging its tail happily, following the mother and daughter everywhere. Amid the simple scene of the thatched house, a new day begins with peaceful joys and the overflowing love of Huyen and Micah. Huyen closed the bamboo door of the small house and carefully locked it. She slung the familiar bamboo basket over her shoulder, containing only a few essential items for the day and Appo's trip. Holding Micah and Appo's small hand, Huyen gently led her out of the yard. Micah happily skipped beside her mother, her curious eyes observing the morning scene still shrouded in mist. The mother and daughter walked along a narrow dirt path along the canal, chatting and looking for things to sell at the market. The early morning sunlight gently spread over the fields, reflecting the slow steps of mother and daughter, carrying hopes for a peaceful and prosperous new day. As I arrived at the vast fragrant field, lush green rows stretched out with countless golden ripe pineapples. Huyen stopped at the edge of the field and gently placed little Micah on a clean patch of grass under a tree and Appo's shade. She pointed towards the dense pineapple beds in front and kindly advised, and quote, "Stay here and play nicely. Mom is going inside to pick pineapples. There are many thorns there, and if you get pricked on your hands or feet it will hurt a lot. Don and Appo's run in there." And quote. Seeing Micah obediently nod, Huyen felt reassured and smiled. She bent down to adjust her child and Appo's hat and added a few more words before standing up. The pineapple farm owner was standing behind, and together they walked into the midst of the lush green pineapple rows. Huyen is carrying a woven basket on her back and carefully steps into the fragrant garden. The rows of fragrant plants grow densely together, with long sharp leaves and numerous thorns along the edges. She bends down to weave through each row of plants, avoiding the thorns that might scratch her hands and clothes. As she enters the dense rows of fragrant plants, Huyen attentively observes the gardener and Appo's work. Seeing that Huyen is still a bit unsure, the gardener smiles and picks up a fragrant fruit to demonstrate. And quote, "Look at this, the unripe fruit still has a dark green shell, and the eyes of the fruit are sharp and hard. The ripe fruit will turn yellow, have a mild aroma, and the eyes will open more evenly." End quote. Huyen nods attentively, memorizing every word. The gardener then points to the thorny leaves surrounding her and says, end quote, "Don and Appo's hold the fruit too close to your body when picking. Use one hand to grasp the stem or the tip of the fruit, and the other hand to part the leaves. Remember to stand slightly tilted to avoid the thorns scratching your hand and face." End quote. I said. She demonstrated once slowly. The pineapples were neatly harvested without touching the sharp thorns. Huyen followed suit, initially a bit clumsy but gradually getting the hang of it. Huyen carefully put on the work gloves provided by the garden owner and stepped deeper into the pineapple rows. She bent down, gently parted the long thorny leaves to find the ripe yellow fruits. Remembering the instructions just learned, Huyen firmly grasped the stem, gently twisted, and neatly picked the first pineapple. Seeing that she could do it, she smiled happily. Each ripe pineapple was quickly selected and carefully placed into the bamboo basket behind her. Soon, the bottom of the basket was filled with golden pineapples, emitting a gentle fragrance in the fresh morning. In the small house nestled by the canal, everything remained quiet as Huyen and Micah had left early. Just then, a familiar figure appeared on the dirt road leading to the yard. It was Da. Today, he had come from early morning, carrying an old but well-maintained pickaxe on his shoulder. Stopping in front of the gate, Da looked around the empty yard and sighed softly when he didn't oppose see the mother and daughter anywhere. He guessed Huyen had taken the opportunity to go to work early to earn some extra income. He placed the pickaxe down by the tree trunk. Da stepped to the front porch and gently opened the door. The small house was still tidy as always, only missing the laughter of Huyen and Micah. As soon as he entered, he saw the small dog curled up in the corner of the house. Hearing the noise, the dog immediately got up, wagging its tail happily, then ran over to Da. He smiled, sat on the floor, and reached out to pet the soft fur of the dog. The dog happily lay on its back, occasionally rubbing its head against his hand like a long-lost friend. He gently scratched under its chin, causing its little tail to wag even more vigorously. Huyen is still diligently working in the large fragrant garden. Her gloved hands skillfully select ripe yellow fruits and carefully pick them. Under the increasingly intense sunlight, beads of sweat roll down her face, but Huyen keeps working without stopping. Before long, the bamboo basket on her back is filled with fragrant pineapples. She carries the ready-made bag in her basket. Huyen gently places each pineapple into the bag, arranging them neatly to prevent damage. In her mind there is only a simple thought: to work hard and earn a little extra money to support her and her mother's life. Amid the sweet aroma of ripe pineapples, her small figure tirelessly moves from one row to another, without rest. While waiting for her mother to work in the fragrant garden, little Micah obediently sat under the shade of a tree at the edge of the field. In her hands was a loaf of bread that Huyen had prepared in the morning. Micah hugged the larger-than-her-hand bread, slowly taking small bites. Her big round eyes occasionally looked toward the lush green fragrant rose to find her mother and Appo's silhouette. The gentle breeze from the inland delta softly blew, causing her short hair to flutter slightly. After eating a few bites, Micah smiled happily and continued to enjoy the delicious loaf of bread. Even though she was sitting alone outside the garden, she was very well behaved, eating while waiting for her mother to return. Da stood up, gently patted the dog and Appo's head, then stepped out onto the porch to pick up the hoe placed by the tree. He slung the hoe over his shoulder and slowly walked to the front ditch, where the still water reflected the rows of trees along the bank. Upon reaching there, Da rolled up his pants, stood at the edge of the ditch, and carefully scooped up the mud with each shovelful onto the bank. The sound of the hoe hitting the soft mud echoed steadily in the quiet morning. He worked slowly and steadily, both removing mud and stirring the water to keep the ditch clear. The wet mud chunks he gathered into a pile beside the bank. When he scooped up quite a bit of mud from the canal onto the bank, Da paused for a moment. He put down the shovel by the canal, rolled up his sleeves, and sat down beside the wet mud pile. His sun-kissed hands skillfully mixed the mud into even batches, patiently kneading each handful, squeezing tightly, and turning it over until the mixture became smooth and soft. The mud covered both his hands and arms, but Da paid no mind. In the quiet courtyard, he worked silently under the morning sun, his eyes focused on each handful of mud as if preparing to create something truly useful for the small house of Huyen and her mother. When the woven basket on her back and the bag outside were filled with ripe yellow pineapples, Huyen stood up straight to rest for a moment. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and carefully tied the bag shut. At that moment, the garden owner also came to check the harvested pineapples. The two of them counted and estimated the number of pineapples in the bag. The garden owner took out a small notebook to calculate the money. After some calculations, she smiled and informed Huyen of the amount to be paid. Huyen carefully took the money she had prepared earlier from her shirt pocket, counted each bill, and handed it to the garden owner. Looking at the bag full of fragrant pineapples, she felt tired but very happy inside. She knew that selling these pineapples at the market would help her, and her mother earned some extra money to cover their living expenses in the coming days. Seeing that the mud mixture was evenly mixed, soft, and sticky to his liking, De nodded slightly in satisfaction. He brushed off the mud from his hands, then took an old bag and placed it beside him. He bent down using both hands to scoop large handfuls of mud into the bag. Before long the bag was heavy. De used both hands to lift it slowly and carried it into the kitchen inside the house. Upon arrival, he placed the bag on the ground and poured each handful of mud into a small pile. He looked at the old, makeshift stove that Huyen had temporarily built with 3 bricks, beginning to envision the new stove he wanted to make for Huyen and Micah. Without hesitation, De rolled up his sleeves, preparing to start shaping and building the stove, hoping that when Huyen and Micah returned, they would have a sturdy and cozy kitchen. De looked at the makeshift stove made of 3 bricks that Huyen still used every day and gently moved them aside. He bent down, took a piece of cardboard and scraped away the rough dirt on the old stove and Oppo's surface, carefully leveling each spot to create a solid base. After a while, the small patch of ground in the kitchen became flat and tidy. Next, De brought in an old bucket, placed it upside down on the ground to make a mold. Next to the bucket, he set up a brick to serve as a support and to shape the opening of the stove. From the pile of prepared mud, he scooped large handfuls and carefully built around the bucket. His skillful hands pressed each layer of mud tightly together, forming a round and sturdy stove body. His hands were covered in mud, but De still focused on his work. He continuously adjusted the uneven spots and used the palms of his hands to smooth the outer surfaces, making the stove look neater. Under the midday sun, the shape of a new earthen stove gradually appeared in the small house. Thinking of Huyen lighting a fire to cook and little Micah sitting beside waiting for a hot meal, De became even more careful with each handful of mud he applied. Huyen carefully tied the fragrant bag tightly to prevent the fruits inside from falling out. Then, she put the bamboo basket on her back and adjusted the straps to secure it. The fragrant bag was not very large but quite heavy, so Huyen had to hold it close to her body with both hands to lift it. She took a deep breath and slowly stepped out of the garden. The rows of green fragrant plants gradually receded behind her. Reaching the edge of the field, Huyen saw little Micah still sitting patiently under the shade of a tree. Seeing her mother appear, the little girl immediately ran over with a bright smile. Huyen smiled gently, bent down to pat her child and Oppo's head, then placed the fragrant bag down to rest for a while. After regaining her strength, she hugged the fragrant bag to her chest, her other hand holding Micah and Oppo's small hand. Mother and daughter left the fragrant field together, walking along the dirt road leading to the market, which ran alongside lush green rice fields. Huyen walked slowly but steadily, while Micah happily skipped beside her, occasionally looking up to tell her mother about what she saw on the way. The woven basket on her back and the fragrant bag on her shoulder made Huyen quite tired, but every time she saw her daughter and Oppo's innocent smile, she felt more motivated. A gentle breeze blew across the field, carrying the fresh scent of young rice. Under the morning sunlight, the shadows of mother and daughter stretched along the countryside road. They moved together toward the busy market, carrying the fruits of a morning and Oppo's hard work and hoped to sell all the fragrant fruit to earn more money for their livelihood. After applying the necessary amount of mud around the stove mold, De stepped back a few paces to admire his work. Seeing the shape of the stove clearly emerging, he gathered the mud bag and took it outside, placing it aside. Then De returned to the stove, squatting down beside the still damp earthen stove. He dipped his hand lightly into the water and began smoothing each surface of the stove. His calloused hands patiently pressed and repressed the uneven spots, making the mud layer flatter and smoother. For any rough areas he added a thin layer of mud and continued to smooth it out. Every curve of the stove and Oppo's opening, body and corners was carefully attended to by De. Sweat dripped onto the ground, but he remained focused on his work. Not long after, the rough earthen stove initially became neater and more organized. De gently smiled with satisfaction, brushed off the remaining mud stains on his clothes, and admired the new stove. Under the sunlight streaming through the window frame, the small earthen stove appeared sturdy, like a silent gift he wanted to give to Huyen and her mother when they returned home. After a long journey, Huyen and Micah finally arrived at the bustling countryside market. The sounds of laughter, chatter, and vendors calling out filled the air, creating a lively atmosphere of the morning market. Huyen looked around and chose a clean, small corner. She placed the fragrant bag down, laid out the newspaper she brought neatly on the ground. Then Huyen opened the bag and carefully took out each pineapple, arranging them in neat rows. The ripe, golden pineapples were wiped clean of dust and arranged neatly, making them both attractive and enticing to buyers. The bamboo basket she placed beside them to hold the remaining fruits. While Mother was setting up the stall, Micah sat obediently beside her, her curious eyes observing the passing crowd. Occasionally, the girl helped her mother by handing over a pineapple or picking up a fallen dry leaf on the cardboard. Looking at the pineapples neatly arranged in front of her, Huyen gently smiled. Despite feeling exhausted after a hard morning and Appo's work, she still held hope that today she would sell all the pineapples to bring a better meal home for her daughter. Not long after Huyen finished displaying the golden pineapples, people in the market started to gather. Some stopped to ask for the price, others picked up the fruits to examine and smell their sweet aroma, freshly picked from the garden. Huyen always responded politely, sometimes helping customers select the ripest and most beautiful fruits. An elderly woman came early to buy two to take home for her grandchildren. A man stopped by to choose a few as a gift. Every time she made a sale, Huyen carefully received the money and neatly stored it in a small bag inside her shirt. The pineapple displays on the cardboard gradually thinned out. Beside her mother, Micah obediently sat guarding the stall. Occasionally, customers would praise the girl for being adorable, and Micah would smile shyly, making everyone feel happy. The atmosphere around the small market corner shared by the mother and daughter was always lively with conversations. Seeing the pineapples gradually decrease, Huyen felt a sense of relief in her heart. All the hardships from early morning, from sneaking through the thorny leaves in the fragrant garden, now seemed to be rewarded. She was selling goods while hoping that by noon, she would sell all the remaining pineapples so she could take Micah home early. When the earthen stove was almost finished, De stood up, dusted off the mud from his hands, and took the remaining bricks to the corner of the garden, stacking them into a pile. He bent down to pick up dry branches and a few small pieces of wood from outside the corner of the garden. He carefully arranged the firewood inside the stove, leaving a gap to make it easier to ignite the fire. Then De took out a lighter. The small flames quickly caught on the dry wood, making a steady crackling sound. He sat beside and observed for a while, occasionally adding a few small sticks to keep the fire burning moderately. The heat from the flames spread throughout the stove body, helping the remaining damp mud to start drying and hardening. De understood that if the fire was too large, the stove might crack, so he kept the flames small and smoldering. The flickering light reflected on the newly built stove, highlighting the detailed lines he had carefully shaped all morning. Watching the thin smoke rising from the stove opening, De smiled slightly with satisfaction. The new stove was gradually taking shape, and he hoped that from now on, Huyen and her mother would have a sturdy, warmer place to cook in their small house. By the afternoon, the last pineapples on the stall had been sold out. Looking at the empty space in front of her, Huyen couldn't and Appo's hide her joyful smile. She carefully counted the money from the sales and put it into her shirt pocket. Then Huyen tidied up the stall, folded it into a basket, and checked if anything was left behind. At this moment, Micah was exhausted after sitting with her mother at the market all morning. The girl rubbed her eyes, yawned widely, and leaned against her mother and Appo's, shoulder. Seeing this, Huyên smiled gently, bent down, and carried Micah on her back. The girl wrapped her arms around her mother and Appo's neck and obediently rested her head on her shoulder like a little cat. The bamboo basket was carried by Huyên in her hand, while Micah was dozing off on her back. Mother and daughter slowly left the increasingly empty market. On the sunny countryside road, Huyên took steady steps toward the small house. Although her legs were exhausted after a hard day in Appo's work, she felt light and happy inside. Today, all the lucky lottery tickets were sold out, meaning the two of them would have extra money to cover their living expenses in the coming days. The gentle breeze blew softly across the lush green fields. On her mother and Appo's back, Micah gradually fell asleep in a peaceful nap. Huyên gently held her little feet and continued walking, carrying the simple joy of a successful working day on her way home. Huyên slowly walked back to the small house as the sun was setting. After a tiring day, she just wanted to get home and rest. But as she approached the gate, Huyên suddenly stopped when she saw a man and Appo's silhouette standing by the ditch in front of the house. Instinctively cautious, she hugged Micah more tightly. Not having time to see clearly who the person was, Huyên quickly lowered her child and hurriedly hid behind the house. Her heart was pounding rapidly, and her cautious eyes observed over the corner of the wall. Meanwhile, Da had just washed the dirt off his hands and feet. He stood up, shook off the remaining drops of water from his hands, then turned to look at the house. He had no idea that Huyên had returned and was silently hiding behind the house. Micah curiously looked up. From behind the leaf wall, she recognized the familiar figure of Da. But before she could speak, Huyên gently placed her hand over her mouth to signal silence. The mother and daughter stood hidden behind the corner of the house, quietly observing the man by the canal, before Huyên tried to get a better look to see if he was really someone they knew. By the ditch in front of the house, Da bent down to wash off the remaining mud on his hands and feet. The cool, clear water flowed through his fingers, carrying away the dirt traces from a morning of work. After washing, he stepped onto the small bamboo bridge spanning the ditch and carried the bucket he had used as a mold for the stove earlier. Squatting on the bamboo bridge, Da scooped water into the bucket. He used his hands to scrub away the remaining mud inside and outside. The gentle sound of water hitting the bucket and Appo's sides blended with the wind blowing through the bamboo rows, creating a peaceful scene of an afternoon in the countryside. After a while, the bucket was as clean as before. Da, holding the cleaned bucket, slowly walked back into the house. As he entered the kitchen, he placed the bucket back in its original spot as if no one had touched it. His eyes briefly glanced at the newly built earthen stove, softly emanating warmth, a faint smile appearing on his lips. After finishing work, I went out to the front yard. The small dog saw me and happily ran over, wagging its tail non-stop. I bent down, picked it up, gently stroked its soft fur, and brought it inside. The obedient dog lay in my arms, occasionally nuzzling into my chest as if to be affectionate. Behind the house, Huyên continued to observe silently, gradually realizing that the man was not a stranger but to himself. Placed the dog down on the floor. I took the familiar coconut scoop to fetch water from the well. I poured it into the small bamboo bowl that the dog still used every day. The bowl was old, placed right in the corner of the house, where the dog usually ate and drank. I gently set the water bowl in front of it and softly said, "Drink some water." The dog immediately ran over, bowed its head, and drank each cool sip. I sat down beside the little dog, gently stroking its fur warmed by the midday sun. The dog happily lay close to my feet, its tail wagging non-stop. I smiled softly, scratched behind its ear and whispered, "Stay home and take care of the house. Don and Appo's tea run around too much." Hearing the familiar voice, the dog lifted its head to look at me and then barked softly in response. I stood up, looked around the house. Seeing everything was tidy and the new stove was drying out, I felt more at ease. He stepped out onto the porch and gently closed the door. Then, De carried the hoe on his shoulder and slowly walked out of the yard. Under the evening sunlight, his shadow stretched along the dirt road. Without leaving any message, he quietly left as he had arrived, only hoping that what he did today would be of some help to Huyen and her mother. Huyen was holding Micah in her arms when she saw De come out from the house, carrying a familiar hoe on his shoulder. Reacting instinctively, she immediately held the child closer and hid behind the wall, trying to stay silent to avoid being detected. Micah was curious and wanted to look outside, but Huyen gently held her closer and subtly signaled for her to be quiet. From her hiding spot, Huyen quietly observed. She saw De walking slowly across the yard, carefully closing the door, then following the dirt path away. His figure gradually disappeared behind the row of trees at the end of the alley. Huyen remained still for a moment longer, waiting until she was sure De had gone far away. When only the sound of the wind blowing through the bamboo and birds singing on the roof remained around her, Huyen finally let out a sigh of relief. She carried Micah and stepped out of the hiding spot, then slowly walked into the yard. As she entered the house, she immediately noticed that everything seemed different from the morning. Huyen suddenly stopped in front of the kitchen. Where once there were 2 old bricks, now there was a new, neat and sturdy earthen stove. She slowly sat down in front of the stove, quietly gazing at the faint handprints on the dry, hardened mud. Micah sat beside her, curious, gently touched the side of the stove, then looked up at her mother. But Huyen remained silent. She reached out and softly stroked the smooth surface of the stove, feeling the residual warmth from the recently extinguished flame. In her mind, she pictured De quietly working from morning until now, dredging mud from the canal, mixing handfuls of mud, carefully layering it, then sitting for hours to smooth out the stove. The small house suddenly became unusually quiet. Only the gentle sound of the wind swaying the thatched roof and the small dog lying by the door occasionally wagging its tail. Huyen sat absent-mindedly in front of the new stove, her eyes distant as if thinking about something for a long time. An indescribable feeling crept into her heart. She didn't know what to say nor what to think, only quietly sitting there, gazing at the stove made from a whole morning of silent labor by the person who had just left. Meanwhile, Micah leaned her head on her mother and Apo's shoulder, obediently sitting beside her, together admiring the new stove in the gentle midday sunlight. After tidying up the bamboo basket and the money from sales inside the house, Huyen opened the small bag she brought back from the market. Inside were 2 cakes she had saved up to buy for Micah. She took the cakes and went out to the front yard, where Micah was sitting and playing with the dog. Huyen smiled and handed Micah a whole cake. The girl happily accepted it with both hands and sat down to enjoy it. Watching her daughter happily bite into each piece of cake, Huyen also felt her heart lighten after a tiring day. The remaining cake, she did not eat but gently broke into small pieces. The small dog lying in front of the porch saw this and ran over, wagging its tail excitedly. Huyen squatted down and placed each piece of cake in front of it. The obedient dog ate each piece thoroughly, occasionally looking up at her as if to thank her. After eating the cake, Huyen took Micah by the hand and led her into the house. She took out a clean set of clothes and gently changed her daughter. Micah obediently stood still while her mother adjusted her collar and brushed her hair neatly. After changing clothes, the girl happily ran around the house, while Huyen began preparing dinner. She brought out a basket of rice to the front porch, carefully rinsed it several times, and then poured it into the pot. When she carried the rice pot to the new stove, Huyen paused for a few seconds. Looking at the sturdy and tidy stove in front of her, she softly smiled. A feeling of happiness and contentment filled her heart. Huyen gently lit the fire. Soon the flames spread evenly at the bottom of the pot. Unlike the old stove, which was unstable and made of a few bricks, the new stove retained the heat much better. She no longer had to worry about the pot tilting or constantly adding firewood to prevent it from tipping over. Everything became much easier and more convenient. While waiting for the rice to cook, Huyen took the opportunity to prepare the food. The smoke from the stove rose in thin streams, no longer making her struggle as before. Looking at the steady flames and the boiling rice in the new stove, Huyen remembered the person who silently made it. She gently brushed her hand over the stove and continued her work, a gentle smile still on her lips. Beside her, Micah sat playing with a small dog in front of the house. Her clear laughter blended with the crackling firewood, creating a warm scene. As evening fell, the night gently descended, covering the small house by the canal. Huyen lit an oil lamp and placed it on the wooden table in the middle of the house. The warm yellow light spread out, dispelling the darkness creeping outside in the yard. Under the light, little Micah sat on a small mat, playing with the dog and humming innocent songs in her clear childish voice. The cheerful singing of the girl made the usually quiet house feel more joyful and cozy. The small dog lay beside her, occasionally lifting its head to look at Micah, then obediently lying down to listen to her sing. In the corner of the kitchen, Huyen opened her basket and took out a leftover pineapple from this afternoon and Appo's sale. She carefully used a knife to peel off the spiky outer skin, then sliced it into small golden pieces. The sweet, gentle aroma of ripe pineapple spread throughout the house. Huyen planned to use this pineapple as a side dish to make their dinner more delicious. The rice cooker on the stove has just finished cooking, emitting a fragrant aroma. Watching the steady flame beneath the new clay stove, Huyen felt her heart warm. Today and Appo's cooking was much easier. She was preparing the meal while listening to Micah and Appo's cheerful singing under the oil lamp, a gentle smile softly forming on her lips. When everything was ready, Huyen gently cleared the dining tray to the middle of the house. Under the warm yellow oil lamplight, the meal, though simple, was neatly arranged with a bowl of hot rice, some boiled vegetables, and a plate of fragrant golden cooked fish that she had just peeled. Micah obediently sat at the table, her eyes brightening when she saw the dinner. Huyen scooped rice for her child and then gently picked up small pieces of food. She blew on them to cool and fed Micah. The girl opened her mouth to receive each spoonful of rice, chattering as she told her mother about what she saw at the market today. Hearing her daughter, Huyen simply smiled kindly, occasionally wiping the rice grains from the corner of her daughter and Appo's mouth with a cloth. The meal took place in a cozy atmosphere. The flickering oil lamplight danced softly on the wall, clearly illuminating the smiles of the mother and daughter. After a long, hard day of work, sitting together to share a simple meal was a great happiness for Huyen. After the mother and daughter finished eating, Huyen gathered the remaining rice and food into the familiar bamboo bowl, and took it out to the small dog. Seeing its portion, the dog happily ran over, wagging its tail constantly, and ate eagerly. Soon the bowl was completely clean. Satisfied, it lay down at the foot of the mother and daughter, its eyes half closed in full contentment. It was late at night. After a long day of picking pineapples, selling goods at the market, and then preparing dinner, Huyen was also feeling exhausted. She spread a mat on the small bamboo bed, and then held Micah up to lie beside her. The girl snuggled into her mother and Appo's arms, her eyes beginning to close from sleepiness. Huyen softly sang a lullaby. Her gentle voice echoed in the small house, blending with the chirping insects outside in the garden. One hand held her child close, while the other gently fanned Micah with a conical hat to keep her cool. A gentle breeze brushed past, making the girl feel more comfortable. The small dog also curled up at the foot of the bed, dozing off after a day of being well fed and playing happily with the mother and daughter. Before long, Micah fell into a peaceful sleep, her breathing steady beside her mother. Huyen gently lowered herself to stroke her daughter and Appo's hair, her eyes filled with love. Watching her sleep peacefully, she felt that all the hardships of the day had been worthwhile. Then, Huyen reached out to turn off the oil lamp. The soft yellow light gradually disappeared, giving way to the quiet night that enveloped the small bamboo house. Outside, the night wind gently swayed the trees. Inside the house, mother and daughter, along with the small dog, had fallen asleep. A long day ended in the peace, warmth, and simplicity of family love. If everyone loves Mother and Micah Huyen, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a supportive message for the two mothers to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and encouragement for Huyen to try to get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.